I'm Emma Sullivan, 24 years old, and the moment I got the news about my promotion, I was thrilled and couldn't wait to rush home to share it with my family. However, instead of the celebration I imagined, what greeted me were 15 garbage bags filled with my belongings, lined up neatly on the lawn. To my shock, it was my own father and sister who had changed the locks and told me to move out without any warning. Later that very day, I uncovered the devastating truth. They had been secretly plotting for months to cut me out of my inheritance. And of course, I had no intention of leaving quietly. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. And truly, thank you for being here. Growing up in the Sullivan household wasn't exactly easy, but I thought we were a tight-knit family. My mom, Sarah, died of cancer when I was 16, and my sister, Grace, was 20. Dad took it hard, really hard. He's a construction engineer, the kind of guy who believes in hard work and traditional values. After Mom died, he basically shut down emotionally. Grace stepped up to take care of the family, which meant dropping out of college temporarily to help manage the household. Grace always resented that, though she never said it directly. She'd make these little comments like, "Must be nice to have someone else worry about everything while you focus on school." I was the baby of the family, and yeah, maybe I was a bit sheltered, but I also felt guilty about it constantly. After I graduated college with a marketing degree, I moved back home. Not because I couldn't afford to live elsewhere, but because Dad made it sound like the family needed me. "We stick together," he'd say. "That's what your mother would have wanted." So I paid $800 a month in rent, helped with groceries, drove Dad to his doctor appointments, and basically tried to be the perfect daughter. The problem was, nothing I did was ever good enough. Dad wanted me to go into nursing like Grace, but I was passionate about marketing. He'd constantly compare me to Grace. "Your sister sacrificed her youth for this family. The least you can do is show some gratitude." It was like living with a constant weight on my chest. Grace became a nurse eventually, and she was good at it. But she never let me forget what she'd given up. Every family dinner became an opportunity for her to remind everyone about her sacrifices. "I never got to live in dorms like Emma," she'd say. "I never got to party or date freely. I was too busy holding this family together." I worked 60-70 hours a week at a tech startup downtown, pulling in $55K a year, which isn't bad for someone my age in Denver. But according to Dad, it wasn't real work, like Grace's nursing. According to him, I was just playing around with computers. Things got weirder over the past few months. Dad started getting these mysterious phone calls where he'd lower his voice and walk into another room. Grace would come over for these little meetings when I wasn't home. I'd come back and they'd both clam up, acting like they'd been discussing the weather. I started hearing fragments of conversations about property and inheritance. But whenever I asked what they were talking about, they'd brush me off. Even my relationship with my boyfriend Jake became a source of tension. Jake's a software developer, makes good money, treats me well. But Dad decided he wasn't stable enough for me. Grace would make these snide comments about how I was too young to be serious about anyone. 3 days ago, everything changed. My company sent me to San Francisco to present our marketing campaign to a major tech client. It was my first big presentation, and I was terrified. But it went better than I could have ever imagined. Not only did the client love our campaign, but they offered me a promotion on the spot. Senior marketing manager, $85K a year, plus stock options and a relocation package if I wanted to move to San Francisco. I was over the moon. I called Dad immediately. "Dad, you're not going to believe this. I got the promotion. They want to move me to senior marketing manager." His response, "Good. Come home safe." That was it. No congratulations, no excitement, nothing. I called Grace next. She saw my call but didn't pick up. I texted the family group chat with the news. Grace hearted the message. Dad didn't respond at all. I figured they were just busy, maybe planning a surprise celebration for when I got home. I spent my last day in San Francisco shopping for gifts. I bought Dad a new Apple Watch. His old one was cracked, and he'd been complaining about it. I got Grace a spa voucher for the fancy place downtown she'd mentioned wanting to try. I even bought fresh roses to put on Mom's grave. Jake called me the night before I flew back. Something's weird. Your dad came by asking about your salary and whether you were planning to move out soon. He seemed, agitated." "Maybe he's just worried about me leaving for San Francisco," I said. "Maybe, but Grace was there too. and she asked me if you'd ever talked about wanting to claim your inheritance early. What does that even mean? I laughed it off. You know Grace, she's always worried about money. I'm sure it's nothing. Just maybe stay in a hotel tonight when you get back. Something feels off. Jake, these are my family. They love me. You're being paranoid. God, I was so naive. I landed at Denver International around 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Perfect spring weather, sunshine everywhere. I took an Uber home, practically bouncing in my seat thinking about sharing my good news with my family in person. I had this whole speech planned about how the promotion proved that my career choice was valid, that I was making something of myself. The Uber driver pulled up to our house on Maple Street, and that's when I saw them. 15 black garbage bags lined up on our front lawn like some kind of twisted art installation. Dad standing there in his work clothes, arms crossed, face like stone. Grace next to him in her scrubs. She must have just gotten off her shift, holding her phone and looking anywhere but at me. I paid the driver and got out slowly, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. Mrs. Henderson from next door was pretending to water her plants, but I could see her watching everything unfold. Dad, I called out, walking toward them. What's going on? Why are my things outside? He looked at me with this cold expression I'd never seen before. You're 24, Emma. Time to move out. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? We never discussed this. I just got promoted. Grace finally looked up from her phone. Congratulations. Now you can afford your own place. I stared at them, waiting for someone to laugh, to tell me this was some kind of joke. But their faces were serious. Dead serious. I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking. What brought this on? Did something happen while I was gone? We gave you notice, Dad said. When? I practically shouted. When did you give me notice? Grace sighed dramatically. We've been hinting for months, Emma. You chose not to listen. Hinting? Hinting? I could feel my voice getting higher. Normal families don't hint about eviction. They have conversations. I walked toward the front door, fishing for my keys. Maybe I could go inside and we could talk about this like rational adults. But when I tried to put my key in the lock, it wouldn't turn. You changed the locks? I turned back to them, incredulous. We had to, Grace said, not looking up from her phone. For security. Security from what? I live here. Not anymore, Dad said simply. I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. This couldn't be real. I walked back to the garbage bags and started opening them. My clothes were there, thrown in carelessly. My books, my electronics, my personal items. Everything just dumped in like trash. And then I saw it. Mom's jewelry box, the one she'd given me specifically before she died, telling me it was for me to have when I got older. This is Mom's jewelry box, I said, holding it up. She gave this to me. Mom left everything to the family, Grace said. Not specifically to you. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about me moving out. This was about money. This is about the inheritance, isn't it? I said. About the will. Dad and Grace exchanged a look. Bingo. Your mother's will is family business, Dad said. I am family, I screamed. Or at least I thought I was until 5 minutes ago. Mrs. Henderson had given up all pretense of watering her plants and was openly staring now. A couple of other neighbors had come out to see what the commotion was about. The humiliation was crushing. Look, Emma, Grace said, finally putting her phone away. You're an adult. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet instead of depending on family all the time. Depending on family, I laughed. But there was no humor in it. I pay $800 a month in rent. I buy groceries. I drive Dad to appointments. I've been contributing to this household for 3 years. Bare minimum, Dad muttered. Bare minimum? I was beyond caring who heard me now. I work 70 hours a week. I just landed the biggest promotion of my career. What more do you want from me? What we want, Grace said, stepping forward, is for you to stop acting like you're entitled to everything just because you're the baby of the family. Entitled to what? A conversation before you throw me out? Basic human decency? You want to know the truth? Grace's voice was rising now too. Fine, I gave up everything for this family. Everything. I dropped out of college when Mom died. I took care of Dad. I took care of you. I never got to live my life because I was too busy being the responsible one. And now you waltz in here with your fancy job and your big promotion. acting like you've accomplished something, when you've never had to sacrifice anything. I didn't ask you to sacrifice anything, I shot back. And I certainly didn't ask you to resent me for it. Girls, enough, Dad said. But Grace was on a roll now. You know what your problem is, Emma? You think the world owes you something just for existing. Well, newsflash, it doesn't, and neither do we. I looked at both of them, really looked at them, and saw something I'd never seen before. This wasn't anger, this was calculation. They had planned this. How long have you been planning this? I asked quietly. Neither of them answered. How long? We've been discussing your living situation for a while, Dad finally said. While I was gone. You planned this while I was gone, so I couldn't defend myself. Grace shrugged. We knew you'd react this way. Drama has always been your specialty. Drama? I picked up one of the garbage bags. You packed my entire life into trash bags and ambushed me on the front lawn. But I'm the dramatic one? I looked around at my belongings scattered across the grass, at my neighbors watching this family meltdown, at the two people who were supposed to love me standing there, like I was some kind of burden they were finally getting rid of. And something inside me just broke. Not broke in a bad way. Broke in a liberating way, like chains falling off. You know what? I said, pulling out my phone. You're right. I am an adult. And adults don't beg for love from people who clearly don't want to give it. I called Jake. He answered on the first ring. Em, how did it go with... Can you come pick me up? And maybe bring your truck? On my way. I hung up and looked at my father and sister. I'll be gone in an hour, but first I need my documents. Birth certificate, social security card, insurance papers, all of it. We'll mail them to you, Grace said. No, I want them now. We don't have them here, Dad said, too quickly. Another lie. I could see it in his face. Fine, I'll get them another way. Jake arrived 20 minutes later with his pickup truck and his roommate Mike. They didn't ask questions, just started loading garbage bags. Jake put his arm around me and whispered, We'll figure this out, okay? As we loaded the last bag, I turned back to Dad and Grace. They were still standing there, watching us like we were some kind of entertaining show. I brought you gifts, I said, pulling the Apple Watch and spa voucher out of my purse. I set them on the ground in front of them. Congratulations gifts, for my promotion, the one you couldn't even pretend to be happy about. Grace looked uncomfortable for the first time. I also brought roses for Mom's grave, I continued. But I think I'll save those for a day when I can visit without feeling like I need to apologize for existing. I got in Jake's truck and didn't look back as we drove away. That night, crammed into Jake's tiny apartment with all my worldly possessions in garbage bags around us, I made a decision. I was going to find out what this was really about. Because whatever Dad and Grace were hiding, it was big enough to destroy our family over. I started with the family lawyer, Mr. Peterson. He'd handled Mom's will and had known our family for years. When I called and explained what had happened, there was a long pause. Emma, I think you need to come in and see me. There are some things about your mother's will that I think you should know. What kind of things? The kind that are better discussed in person. Can you come in tomorrow? The next morning, I sat in Mr. Peterson's office while he pulled out a thick file. Your mother's will is very specific about the house, he began. She left it to your father with the provision that you would inherit 30% of its value when you turn 25. I turned 25 in 8 months. Exactly. Your father has been inquiring about ways to modify that provision. My stomach dropped. Modify it how? He wanted to know if he could claim that you were no longer a dependent, which might affect your inheritance status. I told him that wouldn't work, but what? Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable. He also asked about what would happen if you were living independently at the time of inheritance. The will is somewhat ambiguous on that point. So that's what this was about. Dad and Grace had thrown me out to try to mess with my inheritance. There's something else, Mr. Peterson continued. I've been reviewing some tax documents your father filed. He's been claiming you as a dependent while you've been paying him rent. That's problematic. Problematic how? It could be considered tax fraud. The room started spinning. Not only had they thrown me out, but Dad had been committing tax fraud while taking my money. What should I do? First, you need to get copies of all your personal documents. Second, you might want to consider consulting with an attorney who specializes in estate law. And third, he paused. You might want to look into what happened to the rent money you've been paying. That afternoon, I called my old friend Madison. She'd been Grace's roommate in nursing school and still kept in touch with her. Madison, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Sure, what's up? Has Grace said anything to you about me, about my living situation, or money? There was a pause. Emma, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Grace has been complaining about you for months. She says you're entitled and that you've been threatening to sue for your inheritance early. I never said anything about suing for my inheritance. I know, I thought it sounded weird. But she also said you've been demanding your dad give you a bigger share of the house. Madison, I never said any of those things. Ever. Oh shit. Emma, I think Grace has been lying. That evening, Jake and I sat down to figure out our next move. Jake is a software developer, and he's really good at research. I've been looking into your family's finances, he said, showing me his laptop. Your dad opened a separate savings account 6 months ago. And look at these deposits. He showed me a series of deposits, each one exactly $800. My rent money. That money never went to household expenses, Jake continued. It went straight into this account, and look where it's been going. He pulled up another screen. Grace's student loans, paid off 3 months ago. Total amount $28,800. The betrayal hit me like a truck. Dad had been taking my rent money and giving it to Grace to pay off her nursing school debt. For 3 years. There's more, Jake said gently. I found Grace's social media. She's been posting about you for months. He showed me Grace's Facebook page, post after post about family drama and ungrateful siblings and having to deal with entitled younger relatives. She'd been painting me as some kind of spoiled brat to anyone who would listen. But the worst part was a post from 2 weeks ago. Some people think they're entitled to inheritance money just because they exist. Meanwhile, the rest of us actually work for what we have. She'd been building a narrative against me for months, preparing for this moment. Jake, I think I'm going to need a lawyer. The next morning, I met with estate attorney Jennifer Walsh. She reviewed everything: Mom's will, the tax documents, the bank records Jake had found, Grace's social media posts. Emma, what your family has done is not just morally wrong, it's legally wrong. Your father has committed tax fraud by claiming you as a dependent while charging you rent. Your sister appears to have been receiving the benefit of that fraud. And they've potentially violated the terms of your mother's will by attempting to disinherit you. What are my options? You could press charges for fraud and theft. You could sue for the return of your rent money plus damages, or... She paused. You could give them 48 hours to return your documents and money before you pursue legal action. What do you recommend? I recommend you protect yourself first, get justice second. But that's your call. I thought about it for exactly 1 second. Let's give them 48 hours. The next day, I showed up at the house with Jake and Jennifer Walsh. Dad answered the door looking shocked to see a lawyer. Emma, what's this about? It's about the $28,800 you stole from me, Dad. It's about the tax fraud. It's about Grace lying to everyone about me for months. It's about you violating Mom's will. Should I keep going? Grace appeared behind him, her face pale. What are you talking about? Jennifer stepped forward and handed Dad a folder. These are copies of bank records showing that Emma's rent money was diverted to pay off Grace's student loans. These are copies of tax documents showing Mr. Sullivan claimed Emma as a dependent while charging her rent, which constitutes fraud. And these are screenshots of social media posts where Grace has been defaming Emma's character. Dad opened the folder and his face went white. I don't understand. You don't understand, I stared at him. You don't understand that stealing from your daughter is wrong. You don't understand that lying on your taxes is illegal? Grace pushed past Dad. This is ridiculous, Emma. You're really going to sue your own family? You're really going to steal from your own family, I shot back. I didn't steal anything. That money went to good use. It went to your use, without my knowledge or consent. Jennifer cleared her throat. Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss this calmly. We ended up in the living room where I'd spent countless evenings watching TV with my family, back when I thought we were actually a family. Here's what's going to happen, Jennifer began. Emma's documents will be returned immediately. The $28,800 in diverted rent money will be repaid within 30 days. And Mr. Sullivan will file amended tax returns to correct the dependent status fraud. And if we don't, Grace asked, then Emma will file criminal charges for fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Grace could lose her nursing license. Mr. Sullivan could face significant penalties for tax evasion. Dad was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Grace, you told me Emma was planning to take the house. You said she was going to sue us. Grace's face went red. I was protecting our family's interests. By lying about me, I stood up. Dad, when have I ever said anything about taking the house? When have I ever threatened to sue anyone? He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw confusion instead of anger. Grace said you told Jake you wanted to claim your inheritance early. She said you were resentful about having to pay rent. Grace said a lot of things, apparently, none of them true. That's when Grace broke down, not crying. I'd seen Grace cry before. This was different. This was the collapse of someone who'd been caught in a web of lies. You don't understand, she sobbed. I gave up everything for this family. I was supposed to be a doctor, but I had to drop out to take care of everyone. I watched you go to college, have fun, date, build a career, while I was stuck here being the responsible one. So you decided to punish me for it? I decided to get what I deserved. By stealing from me? By lying about me? By manipulating Dad? You were always Mom's favorite, Grace screamed. Perfect little Emma who could do no wrong. Do you know what it was like living in your shadow? My shadow, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Grace, you're 4 years older than me. You've had your nursing license for 2 years. You make good money. What shadow? The shadow of the daughter who never had to sacrifice anything. I sacrificed plenty. I sacrificed having my own place so I could help this family. I sacrificed relationships because Dad didn't approve. I sacrificed job opportunities in other cities to stay close to home. But apparently, none of that mattered because you'd already decided I was the enemy. Dad was looking back and forth between us like he was seeing us both for the first time. Grace, he said slowly, you told me Emma complained about living here. She did. She always talked about wanting her own place. Of course I talked about wanting my own place eventually. I'm 24 years old. That's called being a normal adult. Dad turned to Grace. You told me she said I was holding her back. She said you didn't understand her career. I said you didn't support my career. There's a difference. Jennifer cleared her throat again. Perhaps we should focus on the resolution here. But I wasn't done. 3 years of walking on eggshells. 3 years of feeling like nothing I did was good enough. 3 years of being treated like an ungrateful burden. It was all coming out now. You want to know the truth, Grace? I felt sorry for you. I felt guilty that you'd had to sacrifice for the family. I stayed home longer than I wanted to because I thought you needed the help. I turned down job opportunities because I thought Dad needed me here. I've spent 3 years trying to prove that I'm worthy of being part of this family. And the whole time, you've been sabotaging me. I never sabotaged you, Jake pulled out his phone. Emma's previous boyfriend, David. He told me Grace called his work and told him Emma was emotionally unstable and that he should be careful about getting too involved with her. Everyone turned to stare at Grace. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. You broke up my relationship, I whispered. He wasn't right for you. That wasn't your decision to make. Girls, please, Dad said, but I was beyond caring about keeping the peace. What else, Grace? What else did you do? Did you sabotage my job applications too? Did you give bad references when companies called? Her silence was answer enough. Oh my God, you did. You actually sabotaged my career. I was protecting you from making mistakes. You were protecting yourself from me succeeding, Jennifer stood up. I think we need to take a break here. Emotions are running high. No, I said, standing up too. I want everything out in the open, right now. Grace, I want to know every lie you told, every time you sabotaged me, every way you manipulated this situation. Grace looked around the room like a trapped animal. Fine. You want the truth? Here's the truth. I told Dad you were ungrateful. I told him you complained about paying rent. I told your boyfriends you were unstable. I gave bad references when employers called. I posted about you on social media. I convinced Dad that you were planning to take the house. And yes, I took your rent money to pay off my loans because I deserved it more than you did. The room went silent. I deserved it more, she repeated, quieter now. I sacrificed my 20s for this family. I earned that money. You earned money I paid to live in my own home? This was never your home. This was always my home. I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who took care of everything. You just waltzed in after college and expected everything to be handed to you. I expected to be treated like a member of the family. I expected basic respect. I expected honesty. You expected to inherit Mom's money without ever having to work for it. Grace! Dad's voice cut through our screaming match. He was standing now, looking at Grace like he'd never seen her before. Is that what this is about? Your mother's will? Grace's face crumpled. Partly. What do you mean, partly? Grace looked around the room, realizing she'd already confessed to everything anyway. Marcus said. He said we could contest the will if Emma wasn't living here when she turned 25. He said we could argue that she'd abandoned the family. Marcus? I asked. Who the hell is Marcus? Dad looked confused too. Grace, who is Marcus? Grace took a shaky breath. Marcus Chen. He's my boyfriend. He runs an investment consulting business. He's been helping me understand our legal options. Legal options for what? For protecting the family assets. Jennifer and I exchanged a look. This was getting worse by the minute. Grace, Jennifer said carefully. What exactly has this Marcus person told you? He said that inheritance laws are complicated, and that families need to be strategic about asset protection. He said Emma living here as an adult dependent could complicate things, and that it would be better for everyone if she was financially independent when the inheritance kicked in. And you believed him? He knows about these things. He's helped lots of families. Jennifer was taking notes now. Grace, I need you to understand something. What you're describing sounds like inheritance fraud. If this Marcus person advised you to manipulate your sister's living situation to affect her inheritance, that's illegal. Grace went pale. But he said it was just good financial planning. Grace, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Where did you meet Marcus? At the hospital. He was a patient, and I was his nurse. We started talking, and he told me about his business. He said he'd helped other families in situations like ours. Jake was already on his phone, typing. Marcus Chen, Investment Consulting, Denver, he muttered, scrolling through search results. Oh, Emma, you need to see this. He showed me his phone. A local news article from 6 months ago. Local investment advisor under investigation for elder fraud. The article described Marcus Chen as a man who targeted families dealing with inheritance issues, convincing them to make financial decisions that ultimately benefited him. Grace, I said quietly, I think Marcus has been using you. No, he loves me. We're planning to get married. When? After we sort out the family finances. You mean after you get my inheritance money? The truth was hitting Grace like a series of slaps. Her face went through about 6 different expressions before settling on horror. He said we could use the money to start fresh, maybe move to California. Grace, Dad said, sinking back into his chair. What have you done? That's when Marcus himself showed up. The doorbell rang, and Grace jumped up. That's him. That's Marcus. He can explain everything. She ran to the door and came back with a man in his early 30s, wearing an expensive suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He took one look at Jennifer, and his smile faltered. Grace, sweetheart, you didn't mention you were having a family meeting. Marcus, this is my sister Emma and her lawyer. They're saying that what we're doing is illegal. Marcus's eyes went cold. I see. And what exactly are they claiming is illegal? Jennifer stood up. Mr. Chen, I presume? I'm Jennifer Walsh, estate attorney. I understand you've been advising the Sullivan family about inheritance matters. I provide financial consulting services, yes. Without a license? Marcus's jaw tightened. I don't need a license to give general advice to friends. Actually, you do, if you're advising people about legal matters involving inheritance and estate planning. And if you're advising them to manipulate living situations to affect inheritance distributions, that's fraud. Marcus looked around the room, and I could see him calculating his next move. Grace, he said smoothly, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Grace said, but her voice was shaky now. They're saying you could get in trouble. They're saying I could lose my nursing license. They're trying to scare you, baby. This is just family drama. We knew Emma would react this way. How did you know how I would react? I asked. You've never met me. Marcus turned to look at me for the first time, and I saw something in his eyes that made my skin crawl. Grace has told me all about you. You're quite the little princess, aren't you? Jake stepped closer to me. Excuse me? Oh, the protective boyfriend too. How sweet. Marcus's mask was slipping now. Look, Emma, Grace is an adult who can make her own decisions. If she chooses to prioritize her family's financial security over your sense of entitlement, that's her right. Entitlement? I stared at him. You convinced my sister to steal from me and manipulate my father, and I'm entitled? I convinced your sister to stop enabling your dependence on family money. What family money? I pay rent. I pay for my own everything. For now. But you're just waiting for that inheritance, aren't you? Planning to cash in on your mother's death. The room went silent. Dad stood up slowly. Get out of my house. Robert, let's be reasonable here. Get out of my house! Marcus looked around the room one more time, and I saw him realize that his game was up. Fine. Grace, when you come to your senses, you know where to find me. He walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Grace, the car is in my name, remember? I'll be needing it back. And with that, he was gone, leaving Grace standing there looking like her world had just collapsed, which I guess it had. Grace sank into the couch and started crying. Real crying this time, not the manipulative tears from before. He said he loved me, she whispered. He said we were building a future together. Grace, I said. And I'm ashamed to admit I felt sorry for her. He was using you. He saw a nurse with access to family financial information and a grudge against her sister, and he saw an opportunity. But he knew so much about inheritance law, because he's done this before, to other families. Dad was staring at Grace like she was a stranger. How long has this been going on? 6 months, Grace admitted. Ever since I met him. 6 months. You've been lying to me for 6 months. I thought I was protecting us, protecting you. By throwing Emma out? By stealing her money? By destroying our family? Grace looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Emma, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. What did you mean, Grace? What was the end game here? I don't know. Marcus said he had a plan, and I trusted him. The plan was probably to get you to marry him and then convince you to give him access to the inheritance money, Jennifer said. It's a classic long con. Grace buried her face in her hands. I've ruined everything. The room was quiet except for Grace's crying. Dad was staring at the wall. Jake was holding my hand. Jennifer was still taking notes. Finally, I spoke up. Here's what's going to happen. I want my documents back today. All of them. I want the $28,800 returned within 2 weeks. I want Dad to file amended tax returns. And I want Grace to get professional help. Emma, Dad said quietly, can you forgive us? I looked at him. This man who had raised me, who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and walked me down the aisle at my high school graduation, who had also let his grief and his older daughter's manipulation turn him into someone who could throw his youngest child out like garbage. I don't know, Dad. I honestly don't know. Can you come home? This isn't my home anymore. You made that clear 3 days ago. But if we fix this, you can't fix 3 years of making me feel unwelcome. You can't fix making me question my worth as a person. You can't fix the fact that when I needed you most, when I came home excited about the biggest achievement of my career, you chose to destroy me instead of celebrate with me. Dad's face crumpled. Emma, I thought... Grace said you were planning to take the house. She said you resented living here. She said you told Jake you wanted to force me to sell so you could get your inheritance early. And you believed her without ever asking me directly? She's my daughter too. I thought she was looking out for the family. I am your daughter too, or I was, until you decided Grace's word was worth more than mine. Grace looked up from her hands. Emma, please. I know I messed up, but we're still family. Are we? Because family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie about each other. Family doesn't manipulate each other. What you did to me, Grace, wasn't family behavior. It was sociopathic. That's not fair. Fair? I stood up. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you talking to me if you had concerns instead of plotting behind my back. Fair would have been Dad asking me directly about my intentions instead of believing your lies. Fair would have been treating me like a human being instead of an obstacle to your financial plans. Jennifer cleared her throat. Emma, we should discuss next steps. I looked around the room one more time, at Dad, who couldn't meet my eyes, at Grace, who was still crying but now it felt like crocodile tears, at the living room where I'd spent countless hours believing I was part of a loving family. The next step is that I'm leaving. You have 2 weeks to get me my money. You have 24 hours to get me my documents. And you have the rest of your lives to figure out how to live with what you've done. Emma, please, Grace tried one more time. No, Grace. I gave you 24 years of my life. I gave you my trust, my love, my money, and my loyalty. In return, you gave me betrayal, theft, and manipulation. We're done. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Grace? When Marcus comes crawling back, and he will, because guys like him always do when they need something, remember that he was willing to throw you under the bus the minute things got difficult. That's who you chose over your sister. Jake and Jennifer followed me out. As we reached the car, I heard the front door open behind us. Emma, Dad called out. I love you. I turned around. If this is what your love looks like, Dad, I don't want it. 2 weeks later, I had my documents and my money. Dad filed amended tax returns. Grace entered therapy, though I heard through the grapevine that she mostly spent the sessions complaining about how I'd overreacted to the situation. Marcus did come back, just like I predicted. He showed up at Grace's apartment a month later, claiming he'd worked things out with the authorities, and they could pick up where they left off. Grace, to her credit, called the police. Turns out there were warrants out for him in 3 other states for similar scams. I used the settlement money as a down payment on a small condo across town. Jake and I moved in together, and 6 months later, I accepted the transfer to San Francisco. The tech company loved my work so much they promoted me again within a year. I'm now a marketing director making 6 figures, with stock options that are worth more than Dad's house. For the next 2 years, my contact with Dad and Grace was minimal. The hurt didn't vanish overnight, but time and distance softened the sharp edges. I didn't forget, but I chose not to carry the anger everywhere I went. When Jake and I planned our wedding in San Francisco, I decided to invite them. Not because everything was forgiven, but because I was ready to close the chapter on that part of my life. They came, dressed neatly, offering simple words. Dad said, wishing you happiness, and Grace said, you look beautiful. That was enough. I still keep my boundaries. I prioritize my mental health, my marriage, and the chosen family I've built. But I also don't let the past define every interaction with my biological family. Forgiveness for me doesn't mean erasing what happened or pretending it never hurt. It means building my own wall of protection, standing on my side of it, and knowing I survived. If Dad and Grace want to stand on the other side and wish me well, I can smile and accept it from a safe distance. My life and my happiness will always remain in my hands. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, though that was devastating. The hardest part was realizing that the family I thought I'd belonged to had never really existed. I'd spent years trying to earn love that was conditional, respect that was never coming, and acceptance from people who saw me as a burden rather than a blessing. But here's the thing, and this is what I want you to understand if you're watching this and recognizing your own story. Sometimes the greatest gift toxic people can give you is the motivation to build a better life. I'm happier now than I've ever been. Jake and I got married last year in a small ceremony in San Francisco. My chosen family of friends and colleagues filled the roles that my biological family couldn't. I have a career I love, financial security I earned myself, and relationships based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I started a blog about family estrangement that's connected me with thousands of people who've had similar experiences. I've written a book about setting boundaries with toxic family members. I speak at colleges about recognizing manipulation and building healthy relationships. I've even started a small scholarship fund for students from dysfunctional families who need help getting on their feet. The scared, confused girl standing on that lawn 3 years ago, surrounded by garbage bags and family members who'd rather see her homeless than happy, couldn't have imagined any of this. She thought losing her family meant losing everything. She didn't realize it meant gaining herself. If you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, I want you to know something. You are not crazy. Your feelings are valid. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, especially by the people who claim to love you. And if they can't or won't do that, you have every right to protect yourself, even if it means walking away. Family isn't about blood. It's about love, respect, support, and genuine care for each other's well-being. If the people in your life can't provide those things, they're not really family. They're just people who happen to share your DNA. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary, and sometimes the people who react worst to your boundaries are the ones who benefited most from you not having any. You don't owe anyone access to your life, your energy, or your resources just because you're related. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. And you definitely don't have to accept abuse, manipulation, or theft just because it comes from family. I know it's scary to think about cutting ties with family members. I know it feels like giving up. But sometimes what feels like giving up is actually just giving yourself permission to find the love and acceptance you deserve. 3 years ago, I thought I was losing everything. It turns out I was just making room for something better. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment and share your own experience. Let's support each other. Hit the like button if this helped you feel less alone. And subscribe if you want to see more content about building healthy relationships and recovering from family trauma. Remember, your mental health matters more than their comfort. Your well-being is worth more than their approval. And your future is more important than their feelings. Take care of yourselves out there. You're worth it.